My name is Dawn, and my wife's name is Carla. We have been married for 8.5 years and have an 8-year-old son, Steve, and a 4-year-old daughter, Lori. Yes, that's right. Carla was pregnant when we got married, and Steve was born 6 months after the wedding. None of our friends or family really cared that we had to get married, except for Carla's parents. They were, of course, very disappointed in their daughter, but they made sure everyone knew that the real blame lay with me. I was the bad guy who convinced their daughter to have sex before marriage. I was the creep who got her pregnant, and I was the low person who ruined all her opportunities. I never lived up to the man they wanted as their daughter's husband, and I never could. They think she had to settle for me. How would you feel in such a situation? I felt terrible. Of course, I actually did what they said. I actually talked her into having sex with me, and I actually took her virginity. This is true, but I must say that young Carla was very interested in doing everything I wanted. She was a very welcome participant, and I feel no shame in what we did together. It was fantastic, and we both loved it. As for her parents, let them shove their accusations far away. I love their daughter more than they could ever hope for from any man, and she knows it, but her mother and father will never understand it. They can't get over the fact that she got pregnant. Nothing I have done or could ever do will change their minds. I'll be the bad guy until they die. Carla and I met when she was a high school senior in Chicago Heights, and I was a sophomore at the University of Illinois at Champaign. I knew she was my one from the moment I met her. We became a couple very soon after starting our relationship and just seemed connected. After Carla graduated from high school, she lived at home with her parents and worked as a teller at the Chase Manhattan Bank. I saw her almost every weekend, either in Chicago Heights or Oak Lawn, where my parents lived. I had a year left of college when I found out she was 2 months pregnant. We planned the wedding as soon as possible, got married in November, and, as I said, Steve was born 6 months later in May. I received my degree 2 weeks after Steve was born and got a job in airport security at O'Hare. Carla continued to live with her parents until I graduated and got a job. We already had an apartment ready in Des Plaines, and we moved there the very next weekend after I graduated. It was wonderful to finally be together as a family. The next 8 years were great. Jobs got better. We bought a house. Steve grew by leaps and bounds. Our marriage was great. Our sex life was great. Lori arrived, and both kids grew by leaps and bounds. We were happy. There were more promotions, more money, and more happiness. But I guess I should get to the reason why I'm writing this story. All this happiness was about to change. In fact, I have experienced some very unhappy months in my life. My wife and I had a little argument about who was disturbing whose sleep. I tell her that she snores and wakes me up, and she says the same thing about me. She doesn't believe she snores at all, but she has the most annoying raspy snoring that invariably wakes me up, and when it does, I listen to her squeak for an hour before she stops, and I can go back to sleep. I know I probably snore too because I catch myself doing it sometimes, and I figure she's losing sleep too, but it's the same bad boy story again. It annoys me that she thinks it's all my fault. It just annoys me. I already get enough from her parents, and I don't feel like I have to accept it from her either. To help solve the problem, I brought home a voice-activated recorder from work and installed it on the nightstand next to our bed. I laughed and told Carla that we'll just see who snores and who doesn't. The next morning, we both woke up at the same time, and after our morning kiss, we rewound the tape and listened. Of course, there was my snoring, which sounded like a chainsaw, and she pointed her finger at me and said, "See what I have to endure." Of course, it didn't take long before the raspy snoring could be clearly heard in between my chainsaw. Carla gasped and looked at me with such a shocked expression that I just had to laugh. She said, "Oh my God, I'm terrible." With that, we both burst out laughing, and she said, "Honey, we both need to work on this so we don't kick each other out of the bedroom." I agreed. "Yeah, you definitely need to work on that squeak." I was just glad not to be the bad guy on my own again. She hit me on the arm and said, "Honey, I'm sorry that I put all the blame on you, Now I see that we are both to blame. I held her close, and we had a very warm and loving kiss, hug, and of course I allowed myself some pretty intimate touching. But she didn't mind. By the time we finished, the kids were already awake, and we were both late for work. Of course, you all know what happened next. The recorder was forgotten. Several days passed. She asked me to come home early to babysit because she had a meeting at the bank. I noticed the recorder. I chuckled to myself, thinking about the proof that she snores. I just had to hear it again, so I rewound and played the tape. I listened to us the next morning and got turned on listening to us making love. And of course, I moved on, and you already know the main points of what I heard next. She betrayed me in our marital bed. She had sex with another man in our bed. There's nothing more to say. Once I realized what was on the tape, I called our neighbor Judy and asked her to watch the kids for a while because I had a big work project that I needed to focus on. She didn't have anything planned, so she said she'd be happy to do it for me. I took the kids to her and told them to be good to Judy and that I would come get them when dinner was ready. They were more than happy to stay at Judy's and play with her two children, who were almost the same age. When I returned upstairs to the bedroom, I continued listening to the tape. Oh God, Steve, it's been so long since I felt you have me again. I missed it so much. Well, have no fear, my sweet. I'm going to take you crazy this afternoon. You'll have enough memories to last you until next time. Come on, big boy. I really want you to get me pregnant again today. Dawn and I want to have another baby, and I think I'm at the peak of my fertility right now. I'd really like all three of my children to be the same hot daddy. Don was never suspicious of us. He never wondered why the kids didn't look anything like him. Is he stupid or something? Don't say that about Don. He's not stupid. I never gave him a reason to think that I was unfaithful to him. I never denied him sex. We even had sex after you were already with me. Well, I still don't understand how you managed to slip the kids into his lap. Luckily, Stevie Jr. and Lori look exactly like me, so he has no reason to suspect anything. I heard her laugh at that moment about Stevie Jr., and it just broke my heart. Well, maybe today I will give you a child who will be like me and expose you. Then he will divorce you, and you can marry me. Stop talking about all this, Steve. I love Don very much, and I don't want to see him in pain. What we're having is just pure hot sex, and I love it, but that's where it ends. Now just shut up. And take me hard and fast. I want to be pregnant with you by the time you leave today. The rest of the recording was as you'd expect. I listened to everything. I heard everything Steve did to Carla that day. I heard her pleasure when he had her. I heard things from her that I had never heard in all the years we had sex. I realized that I had never satisfied her the way he satisfied her. My whole wedding was a lie. The love, trust, and intimacy I thought we had was non-existent. There was no love or loyalty on her part. How could she love me and do the things she did? She could not. How could she give 100% of herself to our marriage? She could not. She said she never denied me sex, but that was also a lie because I know she let him have her in a way she never let me have. There are not enough words in the English language to describe how I felt when I heard everything that was on that recording. I was hurt to the core. I was physically sick. I could hear my heartbeat and prayed it would keep beating. I was disgusted. I was humiliated. I was scared. I was furious. I can't go on. There are too many words to describe how I felt. Crushed, this word also comes to mind. Yes, I was crushed. This word seems most appropriate. One word describes who I was not. Stupid, I wasn't stupid. Carla said it, and it was true. I was not a stupid person, so I knew that I would have to figure out what to do next. What will happen to me and my family, my life? The first thing I knew I needed to do was secure a copy of the recording for myself. I was sure that somehow I would need it. The recorder had a 2-cassette system, so I set it to copy from the first cassette to the second and made my copy. I put this copy in an envelope and put it in the trunk of my car. No matter what happened in the next few minutes, I knew I had this recording as proof. Secondly, I knew that I needed to keep my knowledge a secret for a while, at least until I figured out what to do. I rewinded to the end of our snoring demonstration and erased the rest. Then I put the recorder back on the nightstand and left the bedroom. If Carla thinks about it, she might consider listening to the tape to make sure she recorded her and Steve. She won't hear anything and won't suspect that I know her dirty little secret. I knew I needed all the facts to determine what to do next. I decided to start from the moment I met Carla and go from there. I met her through a friend who was dating my cousin. I knew the best source of information would be her school yearbooks. I went down to the basement and rummaged around until I found a box containing all of our school yearbooks, and I took all of our yearbooks and put them in the trunk of my car. I put the boxes back exactly as they were so as not to arouse suspicion. If she somehow discovers they're missing, I can always tell they're probably in another box somewhere. Finally, I knew that if I saw Carla tonight, she would know something was terribly wrong, so I called my boss for help. Jim and I became very good friends over the years I worked with him, and I knew I could trust him. I told him what I had discovered and asked him to cover for me for a few days so I could figure it out and make a final decision. I asked him to arrange for me to go to New York for a few days to attend a counter-terrorism course. This would be consistent with the courses I have taken in the past and would not raise any suspicion. Of course I won't go. I had places to visit, people to meet, and a life of lies to expose. Jim agreed to help me with the cover story that this class came up at the last minute and that it was something I absolutely had to do. I needed to be on the plane in an hour. I called Carla on her cell phone and explained the emergency trip Jim had asked me to make. I told her that I would be taking the kids to Judy's and that I would need to pack my things and head to the airport in a few minutes. I told her that I didn't know all the details of the course yet, but that I would call her and let her know as soon as I knew. Of course, she was unhappy with the spontaneous departure, but I told her that there was nothing I could do about it and said goodbye. I heard her say, "I love you, Dawn," when I hung up, but she didn't hear back from me. I then went to Judy and explained to her that I needed to leave immediately on a business trip, and that Carla would come pick up the children in an hour if it was convenient for her. She said it was convenient. I asked that I take Steve and Lori home while I packed my things to say goodbye to them, and that I would return them when I was ready to leave. This was also convenient for her, and we left. I've been following the news lately about that murder in Wisconsin. Stephen Avery was recently released from prison after 20 years for first-degree assault, attempted murder, and false imprisonment, which he did not commit. A group of students from the Benjamin M. Cardozo School of Law, through the Innocence Project, proved through DNA testing that he was not a criminal, and he was released. In fact, the culprit was already in prison for another crime, and they proved that it was he, not Avery, who committed those crimes. Now, however, he appears to be involved in a new murder involving Teresa Halbach, and there appears to be DNA evidence pointing to him. He faces charges of first-degree murder and desecration of a corpse. How terrible for her and her family, but this reminds me that I need to take DNA samples from the children before I leave so I can compare them to my DNA samples and prove that I am not their biological father. The results of these tests would be bad news for me, but I guess I already knew the bad news from Carla's confession on the tape. I finished packing enough clothes to last me a few days and left the house with the kids. I took them to Judy and thanked her again for taking over the children's care for the next hour on such short notice. I left and headed to a hotel in Harvey, another southern suburb of Chicago. It was far enough from Chicago Heights that I wouldn't run into any of Carla's family, but close enough that I could use it as a base for my investigative efforts. After I checked into the hotel, I grabbed some beer and got drunk. It seemed the only logical thing. Why lie and suffer from pain and resentment? Why relive this over and over in your head all night while trying to sleep? Just get drunk and pass out. I knew I would feel terrible tomorrow, but it would happen anyway. So I just got drunk. When I woke up, I really felt terrible. It was already after 11 a.m., and I thought I would die before noon. I had a terrible headache and a sick feeling in my stomach. So I did the only logical thing. I drank a couple more bottles of beer. This was probably the best thing I could have done because the next time I woke up it was already 3:00 in the afternoon and I actually felt a little better. This time I ordered coffee and toast through room service, which arrived a short time later. While I waited, I took a shower and put on clean clothes. The coffee was great, and I was able to swallow the toast and keep it down. Now what to do with the rest of the day? I checked my messages on my cell phone, and there were 3 messages. The first was from Carla from last night. She was upset that I didn't call her when I arrived in New York, and that she couldn't reach me because she didn't know where I was staying. She told me to call her as soon as I received her message. The second message was also from Carla, but from earlier in the morning. Now she was really mad at me because I didn't call last night or this morning. She was clearly annoyed with me, but I didn't care. I'll give her a good excuse when I finally talk to her. I knew I had to talk to her soon, but I was going to put it off a little longer. Damn, she was already angry. How much more angry could she be? I even laughed at this stupidity. We all know she might get angrier. After all, she is a wife. The third call was from Jim. He arrived just a few minutes after Carla called. He said she was angry and wanted to know where I was and what was going on. He said that I owe him the life of me for all the rubbish that she dumped on him, and I agreed. He told her that he didn't know what hotel I would be able to stay at, so he didn't have any more information than she did about where I was. He also told her that the seminar would be held at the JFK Airport Convention Center, and that she could try to contact me there. Well, you know what bureaucracy is like in airport security. She will try until the end of time and will never be able to find me even if I were there. And since I wasn't there, it would be even more impossible, so I was safe until I called her myself. I figured I had a couple of hours to work on my project before she got home from work, so I sat down with my laptop and started making a list. I wrote down everything I already knew. I wrote down the details that needed to be clarified. I went through her yearbook and wrote down everyone who commented on her yearbook and matched them up by year. I called her school and asked if they had a book for their 5-year reunion. The secretary was very kind and said that they have a 5-year reunion book, but would I like a copy of the 10-year reunion book that will be ready soon? I said yes and asked if I could have it electronically, and she said yes, so I gave her my email address and asked her to send it to me. 5 minutes later, I had a list and began matching the names from the album with married names, addresses, and phone numbers. Damn, so much information. I had the most up-to-date list I could hope for, and I even knew the names of the children, pets, hobbies, favorite foods, etc., of all of Carla's classmates. I even discovered that Carla had sent an update on us and listed our 2 children with a note. Hopefully, there will be a third soon. By this time, I was sure that Carla had already returned from work, so I decided to boldly call her and endure her wrath for a few minutes. I had to do this sooner or later. You've probably noticed that my words have become cynicism lately. I suspect so. It was because I no longer cared about her feelings. She was to blame for how I felt, and I wasn't going to worry if my sarcastic side showed a little. She'll just have to deal with it. I called her. Dawn, where the hell have you been? Why didn't you call me back last night or this morning? What's going on? This didn't surprise me at all. I knew she would yell at me, so I let her blow off some steam before responding. I told her that when I arrived it was already very late, and I didn't want to call so late that I wouldn't wake the kids. I also said that I felt pathetic, so I just got drunk, and by the time I woke up it was too late to call that morning. I had to rush to get everything organized for the next few days, and I just didn't have the time. I told her that I had stayed at the Hilton Gardens near JFK the previous night, but that I could only get a room for one night and would have to find another hotel for the next couple of nights. I told her it would be best to call my cell phone, but I wouldn't turn it on during class. I thought this would give me the most time to avoid her calls. I decided that I needed to remain anonymous in the phone calls I would be making while I was here, so I decided to just buy a burner cell phone for the purposes I had in mind. I went to the pharmacy near the hotel and bought a track phone. It was actually quite inexpensive, and there was no way to trace the number or calls. It was perfect. By the time I finished purchasing the phone, it was almost 6 p.m., and I was actually feeling pretty good and a little hungry. I noticed George's rib house on the way back to the hotel and thought it would probably be a good idea to stop and eat. When I returned to the hotel, I began to gather facts. I picked up Carla's yearbook and started going through it page by page, person by person. I wrote down everyone who commented on her album and typed up the comments they left. I created a code system for different types of comments. First, I labeled everyone as M or F. If they seemed like they were friends, I used the code friend. If it was a girl from her close circle, I marked it as a friend. If it seemed like it was someone she might be dating or the comment was more intimate in nature, I would tag it as boyfriend. If it was a negative comment, I marked it as not a friend. When I finished, I had a list of 40 names, about 30 women and 10 men. I sorted the list first by gender, then by other codes. In the men category, I had 5 guys, 4 friends, and 1 not a friend. One of the guys was Steve Wilson. I figured he was my villain, but I needed to be sure before I finished. I thought that not friend, Gil Roberts alone, might be a good source of information, hoping that Carla had rejected him or maybe he didn't like Steve. In the women category, I had 3 girlfriends, about 25 friends, and 2 not friends. All 3 girlfriends were at our wedding, so I knew I would have to stay away from them for the most part. I thought a few of the friends might be able to provide some information, and again, I'll be working seriously with the non-friends. People seem to be much more willing to spill the juicy details if they weren't particularly fond of someone. I added information from the homecoming book to my list, adding married names, addresses, phone numbers, spouses' names, children's names, hobbies, interests, etc. I also added professions and places of work where possible. Not everyone provided all the information, but there was a lot of data. I thought that the more information I had, the easier it would be to get a complete picture of Carla and her lover. By the time I finished this list, it was a little after 10 p.m. and I was already on edge. I decided that I would start early the next morning and hopefully be able to complete my investigation by the end of the day. I decided to get a good night's sleep so I could be ready for the next day. As I turned around the bed, my cell phone rang. Looking at the clock, I saw that it was only 10:30 p.m., and I knew the kids were already in bed, and she had watched the evening news and was getting ready to go to bed herself. I answered the call and waited for what she would say. "Hey, Dawn, I thought you'd call me after you got settled in tonight," she said. "Well, I thought about it, but last time I called you, you snapped at me, so I thought it best to wait and see if you wanted to talk to me yourself," I replied. "I'm sorry I snapped at you earlier," she offered. "I was just upset that I couldn't reach you. This whole trip seems a little weird, and I just felt insecure. Will you forgive me?" That was the news. Forgive her. I seriously doubted that forgiveness would be given easily or soon, but I didn't want to show all my cards at once, so I said, "I'm sure I'll come to my senses in a couple of days. Don't worry about it." "That doesn't feel like forgiveness, honey," she replied. "Well, maybe I'm a little angry too at the treatment I received from you," I countered. She was silent for some time. I didn't know if she suspected I knew anything, and I didn't care. I didn't know if she thought about what she did to our marriage, but I hoped she did. After a minute, she said, "Well, I think I'll let you go. Dawn, forgive me, I love you." I said, "I'm sorry too. Good night, Carla." I heard her start to sob when she hung up. I knew I slept restlessly, but I got some sleep anyway. At least I didn't hear her raspy snoring. This made me feel sad. She was so sweet when she found out her snoring was terrible. She and I laughed so hard about it, and had such a wonderful morning making love. Thinking about what happened next, and what might never happen again, broke my heart again, and I fell asleep from exhaustion. The next morning, I started working on my lists early. My plan of action was to investigate myself and my wife. Using my track phone, I called several of her female friends, posing as Roger Moore from the Department of Homeland Security, conducting a background check on Don Phillips in preparation for his participation in the Chicago Anti-Terrorism Task Force. I said Mr. DeSuze Phillips was married to the former Carla Pedersen, and I believe you were one of her classmates. I continued to ask many questions about Carla's high school affairs, and I eventually confirmed that Steve Wilson was her high school boyfriend. They dated for about 3 years, and she broke up with him a couple of months before she graduated from high school. I learned that Steve still lives in Chicago Heights, works at Chase Manhattan Bank in Chicago Heights, currently as a loan officer, and is recently divorced. Apparently, he has 2 children, 2 boys. I looked in the homecoming book, and there he was. Damn, what a handsome man he is. I can see why he might attract a woman's attention. I could only wish that I was so beautiful. But she broke up with him and married me. She gave her virginity to me, not to him. But then she continued to have a sexual relationship with him, continuing the affair over the years and apparently allowing him to father our children. Why? 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 These were questions that I could not answer. Maybe she can answer them for me. I just don't know. So, Carla broke up with Steve shortly after we met, but she continued to work with him at the bank until we moved to Des Plaines. This, of course, meant that they were close to each other all those days. I could now understand how they had reconnected, but the questions of why still remained. I thought I had enough information from her friends, so I switched to one of her unfriendly acquaintances, Jill Marker. I introduced myself as Roger Moore and asked directly whether there was anything about Carla Pedersen's background as Don Phillips' wife that would be relevant to our consideration of him for a national security position. Wow, as soon as I said those words, she gave away everything that was in her soul. She told me that Carla was the biggest bitch that ever came out of Chicago Heights High. She was a guy thief, a cheater, and easy to get. I asked her what she based these statements on. She told me that in her 2nd grade, she dated Steve Wilson, and Carla stole him from her. She has now admitted there was nothing illegal about it, but said it just shows her character. This character flaw would emerge later when Carla met her husband, Don, as she admitted. According to rumors, most of which were spread by Steve, Carla began dating him again after she got a job at the bank. Steve boasted that he got her pregnant and has had her ever since, making her a mother twice already. He even spread a rumor that this week he inserted a baby into her again. This was relevant information. Jill told me that she wouldn't trust Don Phillips on national security issues because she wouldn't trust his estranged wife. I didn't realize it would be so easy. I also didn't realize how much it would hurt to find out that other people knew about everything that had been going on all these years, and I was so blind to it. I decided that I should find out the whole truth from 2 other non-friends, so I called the other woman, and the story turned out to be almost the same. She was the sister of Steve's ex-wife. She revealed that her sister divorced Steve because she heard rumors and confronted him. He boasted that he had 2 more children. He probably thought that his wife would never divorce him, but he was wrong. I asked Jill if I could get her sister's phone number, and she happily gave it. I was going to use it later. The not-friends man had a crush on Carla all through school, but she never gave him a chance. He said she claimed she was in love with Steve, but probably wouldn't marry him because he was too narcissistic. Rumor has it that Steve tried to get her into bed for 3 years, and she always told him that she would only give her virginity to her future husband. But after losing his virginity, Steve might get a chance for old friendships. He told me that her attitude hurt him because he hoped to be that husband and knew it would destroy him knowing that she would never be faithful to him and would probably let Steve have sex with her if he tried. He said he stopped trying to get Carla to go with him after that. Well, her obvious attitude continued to hurt me even more than before. It became clear to me that Carla had never planned to be faithful to me, planning my humiliation even before we met. Can you feel how bad I was? I already had almost everything I needed from my list of names. Now I needed to understand Steve a little more, so I went into the bank to see him in person. Oh, I wasn't going to let him know who I was, but I wanted to see him in the flesh. He was as handsome as his photographs showed. He was much taller than me and clearly an athlete. It's a shame he was such a scoundrel. He could have been a good match. I had a few more calls and stops before heading home, but I knew I would be back in Des Plaines before nightfall. Having finished all my business, I headed back and stayed at the Candlewood Suites extended stay hotel near the airport. I called Carla around 8:30 p.m. and told her I would be home around noon the next day. I told her to take the afternoon off so we could have some alone time. By then, I was already used to my situation, so she couldn't notice that anything was wrong. I decided that since she had been lying to me for years, a few lies wouldn't hurt. I told her I loved her and would see her tomorrow. I told her everything would be fine. I slept well. The next morning, I walked into my office and had a long talk with Jim. He wanted to know what I had found out, and I told him everything I had found out. He gave me an envelope containing the results of the DNA tests, which I had taken to the laboratory the day before. It cost me a little more, but luckily they provided next-day service for an additional fee. I was glad that I would already have results when I met Carla that afternoon. I opened the envelope because I wanted Jim to know the results too. It was important to me that he knew all the facts. He was my friend and boss, and perhaps in the future I will ask him for a big favor. Dear Mr. Phillips, we tested all 5 samples you brought to us on Wednesday, November 15th. Sample 1 is male and is the full brother of Sample 2, also male. Sample 3 is male and is the full brother of Sample 4, who is female. Specimens 1 and 2 are both half-brothers to specimens 3 and 4, brother and sister. Our conclusion is that all 4 samples share a common father, and samples 1 and 2 have a different mother than samples 3 and 4. Sample 5 is male and is in no way related to any of the other samples. Since we know that you, Mr. Phillips, are sample 5, there is no DNA evidence that you are the biological father of any of the 4 children presented as samples 1, 2, 3, or 4. If we can be of any further assistance to you, please let us know. Sincerely, David Rafferty, Ph.D., Accurate DNA Labs, Inc. I called Steve's ex-wife and asked if I could come and talk to her. She agreed to meet and allowed me to take saliva samples from her 2 children. I had in my briefcase a certified statement from her stating that she had voluntarily provided me with DNA samples from her 2 children. Jim gave me a big hug before leaving and told me he was so sorry for what I had learned and what I was going through. He said that he would be there and ready to help me in any situation. He also said that he should probably watch out or I'll take his job away from him. He laughed as he said this because he said he had never seen such a thorough investigation in such a short time. I laughed too, although there was little joy in the rest of my life. With the tape, statements from many of Carla's former classmates, a letter from Steve's ex-wife, a certified letter from the DNA lab, and a broken heart, I headed home to meet my wife. I entered the house a few minutes before noon. I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator and went into the living room to wait for Carla. It was a little after 12 when I heard her come in from the garage. She hurried to me to hug and kiss me, but I somehow dodged. She had a surprised look on her face when I did this, but I knew it would get worse, so it didn't matter. She asked me what was wrong, and I said, "Do you want a beer?" She said, "No, just tell me what happened." "Carla, I know you were having an affair." She started talking to deny it, and I just raised my hand to stop her. "I don't want to hear anything from you right now. I know you had an affair, and I have proof. Knowing that, what makes you think I'll believe anything you say? So don't keep lying to me and say it didn't happen. Just sit on the couch and let me tell you how it will be. That's all you need to do now. Don't talk, don't cry, don't deny or apologize. It doesn't matter at this point. Just sit down and listen to me." The color drained from her face, and I saw fear in her eyes. I asked again if she wanted a beer, or at least water, and she said she would take a glass of water. I brought her water and sat across from her, so I could look her in the eyes while I spoke my thoughts. "Carla, I know you were having an affair. I'm going to tell you that I have a lot of evidence to prove it. Don't think I'm lying because, in the interests of justice, I want your actions to be moments reflected that I know everything. Believe this, and you will be much better off. If you think that I am lying, you will certainly make mistakes, and you will not like the result of the mistakes. I'll leave this house today. I'll take everything I might need for the next month, and I'll move out. Yes, I said that for the next month I won't be living here. We'll still be husband and wife, but I won't be here. She gasped when I said this and began to sob, but she did not cry openly or try to speak. During this month, you need to do two things. The first is to decide whether you love me and whether you want to remain my wife. No matter what my answer is, you must make this decision. If you do not love me or do not want to be my wife, nothing I want matters. So you have to decide. I don't want this decision today either. I want you to think about it and tell me in a month, not before. Secondly, you must put in writing all the facts of your betrayal of our marriage. I loved the Carla I knew, the Carla I married. I must tell you that I don't love the Carla I see now, because I don't know who you are anymore. So every single fact of your affair or affairs must be revealed to me. I want to know who you had these affairs with. If there was one person, I want his name. If there was more than one, I want all their names. I want to know why you had these affairs, what they offered you that I couldn't or wouldn't give. I want to know when they started, how often they happened. I want to know where they happened, what you did and what you said. I want to know what you got out of these affairs. I want every detail, Carla. Don't leave anything out. I want to know what kind of woman you really are. I've lost the woman I thought I knew, but I need to know who you are if I'm going to have a chance of staying in this marriage. Remember this, Carla. I have proof. That means don't leave anything out. Don't even think about lying. If you lie to me, I guarantee it will all end. If you tell me every true detail, there's a chance that we can stay together. I said a chance, no guarantees. Don't read into it more than a chance. I could see the panic growing in her eyes, and I was almost sure that she understood how serious the situation was. If you decide that you can't or won't tell me the truth, just let me know at the end of the month, and our marriage will end as quickly and painlessly as possible. From now on, the ball is in your court. Over the next month, all decisions will be yours. When you decide whether you love me and want to be my wife, you can send me a message to my work email and attach a written report of your betrayal. I expect to see both in exactly 4 weeks from today, not earlier and not later. Also, if I find out that you continue your affair at any time in the future, our marriage will end immediately. Make sure you understand this. Now about the children. Do you want them to stay with you for the next month, or do you want me to take them? Either option will suit me. If you want them to stay with you, I will come to them every Wednesday evening. I'll pick them up from the babysitter and take them with me until 8:30 p.m. and then bring them home. I'll call you when I get there so you can come out and pick them up so I know you're home every weekend. One of 2 days. You make a schedule that suits you, and I will follow it. If you don't want kids, I'm giving you the same schedule as me. You pick them up from the babysitter on Wednesdays, and I pick them up here at 8:30 p.m., and you can see them 1 or 2 days off each week. I will bring them to you on the chosen day. Now I'll go pack my things, and when I'm done, I'll leave. Make a decision about the kids before I go. With these words, I left the room and headed to the bedroom to pack a couple of suitcases. I heard her crying downstairs while I was packing, but when I came back down, she calmed down a little. Her eyes were red and her makeup was smeared, but she held on. "Dawn," she began, "I know you don't want to hear." "Stop," I screamed. "You're right, I don't want to hear. Do as I say, or we can end this fake marriage right now." Up to this point, I thought I had behaved quite decently, but apparently I overestimated her intelligence. She didn't understand how serious it was, and it made me so angry that I just had to vent my rage. When I screamed, she recoiled in shock and simply lowered her head. "Do you want to keep the children with you, or should I take them?" "I want them to stay with me," she replied, crying. "Okay, then I'll leave. I'll call you tomorrow to discuss a schedule where I'll pick up the kids on Wednesdays and 1 day every weekend. Bye, Carla." And I left. The month flew by quite quickly. I took Steve and Lori to dinner every Wednesday night and then to my hotel room. Lori didn't really understand what was going on, being so small, but Steve knew something was wrong. He asked me why I wasn't home, and I told him that his mom and I had problems that we were trying to solve, and it was best if I stayed away for now. I told him to be patient and not to worry about us. I told him that his mom and I loved him and Lori very much. Steve seemed satisfied with my answers, so I left it at that. I saw Carla every time I brought the kids home. She went out to the door to meet them and make sure they entered the house safely. One day she walked to the car to talk to me, and I just raised my hand to stop her and drove away. I saw her face when I left, and she was crying. After that, she just stood in the doorway. Exactly 1 month after our encounter, I received an email from Carla. It said, "Dear Dawn, I want you to know that I am so sorry that you were hurt so badly. I love you and want to be your wife. Please call me after you read my letter and decide to come back to me. I want to be married to you for the rest of my life. I need you and your children need you. With love, Carla." When I read this statement, I realized that Carla was not going to be completely honest in her letter to me. I knew she wouldn't tell me that Steve and Lori weren't my children. I knew what my answer would be even before I read the letter. But of course, it was still necessary to read the letter. Attached to the email was a long letter. "Dear Don, I am writing this letter to try to convince you to come back to me. I love you very much, and I want to remain your wife and grow old with you. It's very simple to say, but everything I need to tell you is so difficult. I know this will hurt you, and I never meant for this to happen, but I'm going to tell you because I'm going to be completely honest with you. I love two men. I love you, and I love Steve Wilson. You said I had an affair, and probably, according to most people, I did have an affair. To be honest, I never thought of it as a novel. An affair is a short-term infatuation with someone that results in a short-term illicit sexual or romantic involvement. I know this will be very painful, but my relationship with Steve began before my relationship with you. As you know, I was dating someone else when I met you. That someone was Steve Wilson. He and I have been dating since I was in second year of high school. Steve was a handsome, charming, witty, intelligent, caring man. He still has all these qualities. Soon after I started dating him, I realized that I fell in love with him. He was almost everything a girl could dream of in a boyfriend or husband. I loved him, Dawn, but his only flaw was that he would never allow me to marry him. He was so handsome, so sexy, and so confident that he would never have remained faithful to me as a husband. Because of this, I loved him, but I knew that I would never marry him, and therefore I would not give him my virginity. I have never shied away from the thought of giving up my virginity only. Oh, he tried and tried to convince me, and part of me really wanted to, but I wouldn't give in. Then I met you. In a short time, I realized that I love you and that you are the man I want to marry. You were attractive, kind, gentle, smart, funny, and sexy. In you, I saw a man who will remain faithful to me throughout our marriage. All the qualities that I wanted in a husband, I saw in you, and I loved you very much. The problem is that I haven't stopped loving Steve. I loved you both, in different ways, but also equally. It's hard to explain, but it's the closest to what I actually felt. Steve never stopped trying to make love to me. I always refused. I saw you on the weekends, and Steve and I spent time together on weekdays. He knew about you and knew that I loved you too, but he also saw that my love for him did not fade. I once told him that maybe after I gave my virginity to my future husband, I would give him a chance to make love to me before marriage. He looked at me strangely, but didn't say anything more about it. After you and I made love, and I gave myself to you, I'm sure he realized that. He kept pressuring me, asking about the chance I offered. We weren't married, we weren't even engaged, although I knew you were the man I wanted to marry. Dawn, I gave in. I let Steve know I actually wanted Steve to make love to me. I loved him, in addition to loving you. I gave myself to him, and I liked the intimacy. I got pregnant. I knew it was Steve's child and not yours, but I wanted you as a husband, not him. Oh God, I just can't believe I did all this to you. But I did. From now on, I know that I was unfaithful to you. I told you we were going to have a baby, and you married me. You never doubted that the child was yours because you were the one who took my virginity. Little Steve looked like me, so there was no question there. I didn't stop seeing Steve when you left. We've been seeing each other every month or two since then. I continued to be with him even after we got married. I loved you both. You were a wonderful father to Steve, and you are the same to Lori. No woman could have asked for a better husband. I loved you very much, and that love only continued to grow every day. I know it won't make you feel any better, but my love for Steve didn't increase. I still love him just as much as I did then. But my love for you is much greater now than it was. I've been watching you like a hawk for a couple of years, almost hoping you'd be unfaithful to me so I could justify my behavior, but you've never been unfaithful to me as far as I could tell. You were everything a woman could want in a husband, and I was glad to have you, even if I didn't deserve you. I know I'm dragging my feet. I'll move on to the rest. You asked me a lot, so I'll try to give all the details I can. Who is Steve Wilson? Why, because I love him. Where? We met in different places. We met at his place, we met here, we met in hotels and motels. We met in restaurants, in parks, and in his or my car. We just found a way to meet where possible. When? I don't remember all the dates and times, but it was once a month or every 2 months from then until now. We just did it when we could. We made love, we played, had sex. We talked, kissed, and hugged. He did things to me that you and I didn't do. I didn't really want to do it, but I let him because we had so little time together. Dawn, he loves me too. I thought it was a small concession on my part because I was your wife and lived with you, and he only had a limited time with me. Steve got married. It didn't last long because he did exactly what I expected. He cheated on his wife. He was with me, and he had other women too. His wife found out and divorced him. He wanted me to divorce you and marry him. I told him I will never divorce you. I told him that I knew he would cheat on me. It's funny, but my requirements for my husband were much stricter than the way I behaved as a wife. I'm really sorry about that. Don, I know you've heard enough, but I have 2 more things to tell you. Steve is also Lori's father. I'm pregnant, and I'm pretty sure I got pregnant the last time Steve and I were together. This means that all 3 of our children have Steve as a biological parent. I thought it was better for them all to be real biological siblings so that there would never be any questions. But Don, you have always been and will always be their father. You love them and care about them, and Steve has never seen them in all these years. He doesn't want to be their father. I don't want him to be their father either, because I want you to be their father. I'm so sorry that all of this happened, and that you suffered so much. If I could cancel everything, I would. I am so sorry. I pray that you come back to me. I pray that you give me a chance to make things right, to save our marriage. I pray that you love me enough to want this. Please come back to me. I know I haven't answered all your questions, and I promise I will answer any question you ask. I'm begging you to give me a chance. I'm waiting for your call. With love, Carla. The next day was Friday, so I called Carla and told her I would be home early in the morning. I told her to take the day off and take the kids to the babysitter since we had a lot of talking to do. She said she would do so and asked what I thought. I said you'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out. With that, I hung up. The next day, I entered the house. Carla was waiting for me in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, which I gladly accepted. I said we should sit down at the table so I could discuss a few things with her. When we sat down, I opened my briefcase and placed a large stack of documents and folders on the table. Carla, this is my evidence. It starts with this audio tape. I learned a lot of things from it. You cheated on me with a man named Steve. You have cheated on me with him since we got married. Neither of our 2 children are my biological children. You plan to get pregnant with him again so we can have a 3rd child that I can raise for you too. You had sex with me right after you had sex with him. You said you loved me and didn't want to leave me for him. The expression on her face was incredible. If you can't figure out where the recording came from, it's from the audio recorder we used to prove who was snoring. I erased everything except the snoring so you wouldn't know you'd been found out. I didn't actually go to New York. I went to Chicago Heights to do research into your past and find out who Steve was and find out about my children. That's why you couldn't find me in New York. When I found out about you, I didn't want to see or talk to you again. I knew I had to leave before you came home. I put the school yearbooks on the table. I decided the best place to start would be your yearbooks. I made a list of everyone who left comments in your yearbook and categorized them by their supposed relationship with you. Here are the details of what I found in your yearbook. I put my cross list on the yearbooks. I also pulled out the homecoming brochure. This booklet was sent to me by your school administration. It's the booklet that will come out for your next high school reunion. I used it to find the current names, addresses, and phone numbers of everyone on my contact list. I got a lot of useful information from Jill Marker and from Steve's wife's sister, who was in your class. One of the guys who had a crush on you all through high school was also quite useful because he told me that he stopped loving you when he found out that you were planning to have sex with Steve behind my back after we got married. Most of your friends and acquaintances from the past know what you did and what kind of person you are, Carla. I don't understand how you could trust Steve to keep this a secret. After all, he had a virgin queen. The next package of evidence was a folder with a letter from the DNA laboratory. This letter confirms that I am not the father of our two children. I called Steve's ex-wife, and she agreed to meet with me. She agreed to give me DNA samples from her two children, and this letter confirms that Steve and Lori are half-brothers and sisters to Steve Wilson's sons. A letter from Mrs. Wilson confirms that these samples were taken with her permission, and that two of the samples belong to her and Steve's sons. I pulled out another folder from my briefcase, closed it, and placed it on the floor next to the table. Carla, this is all the evidence I have. There is at the moment. I'm sure I could find even more if I tried, such as hotel receipts, stains on clothing, items of clothing or toys that I know nothing about. I suspect there is plenty of evidence, and perhaps even witnesses that I could find if I tried. I don't think I need to do this to prove the extent of your affair, do I? She shook her head in agreement. I'm not one to enjoy listening to a tape of my wife having sex with another man, and I certainly don't need to hear the details from you, so I won't ask you any further questions about it. Your letter confirms all the facts I have gathered, and I thank you for finally being honest with me. I thank you for having the courage to stop lying to me. Carla, I loved you with all my heart and gave everything I had for this marriage. I thought you did the same, and I was so happy with you. When I found out it was a lie, I realized that our marriage is based on a lie, which makes our marriage a lie. When I found out about this, I really wanted to kill you. I wanted to find Steve and kill him. I don't want to do that anymore, but I will do it if I'm forced to. All this time I watched the changes in Carla's facial expression. It went from being surprised at how I knew these things to being afraid of what was in store for our marriage. She reacted especially strongly when I admitted that I wanted to kill her. I opened the last folder on the table. Carla, these are the divorce papers. I filled them out completely, and all that is left is your signature. Also here are the papers giving me full custody of the children, including our unborn child. Her face showed fear, turning into panic. At that moment, I thought I saw madness in her eyes. Even though she ruined our marriage, that look in her eyes made me very sad. This was not what I wanted, but I had no choice in this situation. I couldn't live with what she created. After you sign these documents, I will put them in my safe, and your future actions will determine whether I take them to court. If you agree to all my demands, I will not leave or kick you out, but we will not live as husband and wife soon. I expect you to move your things to the spare room immediately because I will be using the master bedroom. I expect Steve to pay child support of $2,000 per year per child, which will be deposited into trust accounts for each child until they turn 18. This also includes the new child, since he has been so open about boasting that put the bun in the oven. The total amount so far is $30,000. In addition, he must take out a paid-up life insurance policy in the amount of $108,000 to cover these benefits in the event of his premature death. The children must be named as beneficiaries, and you must be listed as the owner of the policy in order to be able to make changes to the policy. As necessary, he will receive a letter indicating that upon full fulfillment of his voluntary support payment obligations, ownership of the policy will be transferred back to him. If he does not comply with any of the above requirements, I will expose it all and sue him for non-payment of child support. This will turn into mandatory payments that will be sent to his employers, current and future. This will likely interfere with his chances of advancement in service, but I don't care. If he agrees to my demands but fails to comply with them at any time in the future, his insurance benefits will cover his children. Take that as you will. All of this will be laid out to him in a neat letter from my lawyer, along with copies of all the evidence I have collected so far. I see you have two options. One, you can leave at any time without the children. Just pack your things and leave. You can always do that. Two, you can sign these documents and stay here with the children, although we won't live as husband and wife. I don't understand why you need a lawyer because your options are very limited. But if you insist on having a lawyer look at these documents, I'll give you until Tuesday morning of next week to arrange it. Just know that if you refuse to sign the divorce or custody papers and try to leave with the children, I will find you and kill you. No matter what you did to our marriage, I am not going to lose the children. Neither they nor I deserve this, and I will not stand for it, period. There's one more condition. You can never see or talk to Steve again. If you do this and I find out well, you'll both have a lot to lose. You lost me, and you also lost Steve because I insisted on it. You can't love either of us. Don't do anything stupid and lose your kids too. That's all I have. So do you want to sign these papers now, or do you want to see a lawyer? I saw that she was a defeated woman and did not take any pleasure in it. But, as I said, I believed that it was the only thing I could do in this situation. Yes, I'll sign them now, she said. And with that, she signed both the divorce papers and the custody papers. I put them in my briefcase and told her I was going to the bank to put them in my safe. I told her I would be back at the house on Saturday morning and expected her to move into the spare room by the time I arrived. I said, "Goodbye, Carla, I'll see you tomorrow," and left. The next day I returned and was completely settled again. Carla moved all her clothes and other belongings into the spare room as I told her to do. Life went on. On the surface, everything looked normal in our house. I was polite to her. We often talked to each other, ate together, played with the children and laughed when they said or did something funny. On the surface, we were just an ordinary family. But you saw no hint of marital intimacy. There were no secret glances between husband and wife, as there had been before. There were no intimate conversations between us. There was no warmth in my feelings. I didn't touch her, and I didn't let her touch me. Time just flowed past us like a skating rink, and sometimes it passed right over us. I know there were many nights I lay awake thinking about what we had lost and wishing it would all go away. I wished that it was just a nightmare that would disappear in the morning when I woke up. But that didn't happen, it just hung there every day. I also know that Carla suffered many nights too. Sometimes I heard her sobbing in her room. There were times when her sobs would have torn me in half. There was a time when I would have done anything to make her happy again. Several times after I heard it, I went back to my bed and lay there, thinking about how I had become a cold and unfeeling person. I knew I had changed. I knew I had become someone that even I wasn't proud of. But I didn't care. I didn't feel her pain. Hell, I barely felt my own pain either. Many times over the next months, Carla tried to get me to talk about what she had done. She wanted us to talk about it and try to find a way to be happy again. I told her straight up that I was not interested in hearing more facts about her betrayal and that there was nothing she could tell me to fix, nothing at all. Every time I refused, she withdrew into herself, and the nights of sobbing in her room continued. Of course, her body was changing all the time as her pregnancy progressed. On Friday morning, she called me and said she was going into labor. I rushed home to take her to the hospital, and 3 hours later, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Yes, I even sat with her in the delivery room and went with her to the delivery room. I even held her hand as she went through labor and birth. Carla asked me what I wanted to name the baby, and I told Grace so we could call her Gracie. She looked at me very strangely because Grace was her mother's name, and she knew that I didn't like her mother very much because of the way her parents always treated me. She asked me if I wanted Gracie's middle name to be my mother's name, Louise. That would be cool, wouldn't it? Gracie Lou, as in the movie Miss Congeniality. I told her that I didn't want my mother's name, and that she could choose whatever name she wanted as long as it had no connection to me or my family. The look on her face was one of shock and hurt. I didn't care. I just left. I heard her sobbing as I walked down the hallway home. On Saturday, I went to visit Gracie. She was as precious as one could ask for, and it only took a few minutes for her to have me wrapped around her little finger. I fell in love with her. How could this happen? How could I fall in love with another man's child? This happened twice before with Stephen and Lori, but I didn't know they weren't my children. How could this happen again? I don't know, but it happened. On Sunday, I went to the hospital to take Carla and Gracie home. Her mother and father were in her room when I arrived. Grace looked at me with contempt and asked why I didn't visit Carla on Saturday when I came to see Gracie. I waited for Carla to say something in my defense, but nothing happened. I looked at Carla, and she had a tear in her eye and turned away from me as I continued to stare. I couldn't believe she would let her mother attack me again. I was absolutely disgusted and angry as hell. I told Grace that my actions or inactions were none of her business, and that if she wanted more facts, she should ask her daughter. She insisted and said that I had no right to talk to her like that she was my wife's mother, and that it was her business. I looked at Carla again, and she just lowered her head. I knew I'd see her head lift when I said, "Well, we'll see how it changes then." I was right. Her head shot up so fast I thought her neck would break, and she finally said, "Mom and Dad, just leave it. I think it's time for you to leave so Don can take me and Gracie home." Her father simply had to express his opinion before leaving. He said, "Look, son, that's no way to treat your wife's parents, but I should have expected that from you." I replied, "Don't ever call me son again. I have never been a son to you and never will be. Now leave." As we drove home, Carla said, "Don, I'm so sorry about this." I said, "Why, Carla? They never loved me. They never showed me an ounce of respect as their son-in-law. They always thought their wonderful daughter married beneath her. Why apologize? You also always let them think that way about me. You never once defended me when they bullied me. Now I finally understand why. Because you never showed me an ounce of respect either. You started not respecting me before our marriage, and every day after that, it's no wonder they don't respect me." Life went on. Oh, I did a lot of things in the next couple of months. In fact, I kept myself quite busy. I did a DNA test on Gracie, and the results showed that she was also Steve's child. I didn't really care about the test results. I knew that was the case. I just wanted the results for the record. I loved this little beauty as if she were my own. No father could love a child more than I loved her. When she looked at me and smiled, it warmed my heart again. This love began in the first few minutes of my Saturday visit to the hospital and never faded. I also spent more time with Stephen and Lori. I was the best father a child could ask for. I loved them more and more every day and never regretted that they were my children. Steve Wilson might have provided half of their DNA, but I was their father in every other way. Life with my children couldn't be better. I loved and adored them, and they loved and adored me. The only thing missing was my beloved Carla. I often thought about that love and how much it meant to me all these years. God, how I missed my wife. I missed the woman who loved me. I cried often. Another thing I did was use my connections to bug Steve Wilson's work and home phones. Yes, I know it was illegal. So what? I found out what I expected. Carla just couldn't resist calling Steve to tell him he was a dad again. "Hey, Steve, it's Carla." "What are you doing, Carla? You know you shouldn't call me. What if Don finds out?" "Oh, he won't know, Steve. I use a payphone at the mall. There's no way he'll know I called you. Honey, I just wanted to say that you're a dad again, and she's adorable. Her name is Gracie. You make the most precious children." "I'm glad she's adorable, Carla. When do we start working on the next one?" "You know I can't do that right now, Steve. Don and I haven't had sex since he found out, so there's no way I could get pregnant right now." "Wow, you must really need this. When do you want to meet?" "I really need it, Steve, and I'd love to meet you, but I can't take the risk right now. I still hope that one day Don will forgive me and I'll get my marriage back. After that, we'll see if we can find a way to meet every now and then. I doubt it will ever be the same. Don is much more suspicious now than he was then." "Okay, Carla, just know that I'm hungry for your hot body, and I'll try to meet you wherever and whenever you can. Please stay in touch." "I will, Steve. Bye, honey. I love you." If you think this phone conversation hurt me or made me angry, you are wrong. After what she did, there was nothing left in my heart that she could destroy. I was completely cold towards Carla. As far as I was concerned, she was non-existent. All the love I had in my heart for her went towards Stephen, Lori, and Gracie. They got everything. There was nothing left for Carla. Nothing she did or could do would bring it back. If I had not had an outlet for my love, things could have been completely different. I might just wither and die. I could get lost in a bottle or in my work. I could forgive her and try to repair our marriage. But none of this happened because I had my children to love and be loved. I didn't need anything else or anyone else. A few months later, Steve Wilson died tragically in a car accident. No one witnessed the accident, but it appears his car veered off the road and crashed into a tree. Carla found out about his death when she called his work number and a stranger answered. I kept wiretapping phones just for this purpose. "Hello, this is Jonathan Davis." "Oh, I was trying to call Steve Wilson." "Sorry, Steve Wilson doesn't work here anymore. Can I find out who is calling? I'm just an old friend. I'll try to call him at home." "Miss, I know this may come as a shock to you, but Steve died in a car accident about 3 weeks ago. You should probably contact his family to find out more details. I'm very sorry to tell you about this." I heard her gasp in shock, and the line went dead. That evening when I came home from work, Carla looked at me strangely. I didn't act any differently than usual, and she didn't say a word about it. That night, I heard her sobbing again in my room, and this happened for several nights in a row. Shortly thereafter, she received a letter from the insurance company requesting a policy payment with the children as beneficiaries. She showed it to me and asked how to fill it out. When everything was ready and the letter was sent, she looked at me strangely again. She said, "You didn't seem shocked when you heard about Steve's death." I said, "Carla, I don't have any feelings for Steve one way or the other. I'm not shocked and I don't care. All I care about is that the kids will have money for their college." She was clearly shocked by my reaction and continued to look at me strangely. A week later, a check arrived for $108,000 from the insurance policy Steve had taken out. Carla and I took the check to the bank and deposited the funds into each of our children's college fund accounts. Each had $46,000 plus some interest that was earned on the initial deposit Steve made. By the time Stephen was ready to go to college, he would have about $80,000, Lori about $100,000, and Gracie about $130,000. This money would greatly help pay for any education they want. On the way back home, Carla asked me if we could talk. I said sure. She asked if I would ever forgive her and if I would love her again. I shook my head in denial. She said I was a cold, heartless bastard. I told her she was probably right. She asked how I could be so cold. I told her that I had never been like this in the past, and that I was sure it was only her actions towards me that made me like this. I told her that I never felt this cruelty when I was with children, and she agreed that she did not see it either. She stunned me when she asked me if I had anything to do with Steve's death. I was sure she knew it from the moment she found out. I nodded my head in agreement. She asked why. I told her that I had wiretapped his work and home phones and heard all her calls to him. I told her that I heard everything she told him about being a father again, and even the parts where she said she couldn't meet right now, but maybe later when things calmed down. I told her that it was obvious that she never had any real love or respect for me, and that she had been using me all these years and would continue to use me if she could. She asked if the same fate awaited her. I nodded my head in agreement. I told her it was only a matter of time. 2 months later, she got tired of waiting and committed suicide. I cried. I cried because Stephen and Lori cried. Their broken little hearts broke my heart too. I didn't cry for Carla. She died to me over a year ago when I first heard the tape and learned that our marriage was a lie. But I cried because my children were suffering. She left me a letter. She left it where only I could find it. Dear Dawn, I'm really sorry. I loved Steve, but not the way I loved you. I loved you more than my life. I know that with what I did, I destroyed your love for me, and I cannot live without it. I know how much I hurt you, and I hoped that someday you could forgive me and love me again. I know I turned you into a monster. When I realized that you killed Steve, I realized that you would never forgive me, and I couldn't handle it. I will go to my grave knowing that I destroyed a good man. Apparently, I still haven't found the ideal husband in you. What I needed was a man who would overlook my selfishness in my quest to love and be loved by two men. I don't blame you for this because it's too much for any person, but it's exactly what I needed. I wasn't strong enough to let go of Steve's love. I should have, but I couldn't. I pray that my death will free you from the monster you have become. I pray that one day you will be able to let go of the hatred you hold in your heart for me and Steve. I hope one day you can forgive yourself for who you became and what you did to Steve. I also know that the monster is never present when you are with children. I see the love and adoration in your eyes, and it warms my heart to see it come back to you from them. When you look at children, I hope that you will see a part of them in me and love them even more for it. I hope one day you will love me again through your love for them. I'm so sorry, Dawn. I'm sorry for this last thing. I just can't take it anymore. I love you. Carla. This time I cried for real. The monster left me, just as she prayed. I cried for the friend I lost, and who would no longer laugh or cry with me, for the lover who would no longer hold me or love me, for the mother of my children who would no longer share their lives, their loves, their marriages, and grandchildren, their successes and failures. I cried for the hole in my heart that was left empty when the hatred left. I had put hatred there to destroy the love for her, and now it was empty. I cried for the life I dreamed of having with Carla, knowing it would never be replaced. And then I cried for my soul, knowing that I had allowed myself to become less than human in my hatred. I destroyed the letter. I went to the bank and took all the evidence of her cheating from my safe and destroyed it. No one will ever know unless there is a medical reason for my children to know that I am not their biological father. In my will, I provided funds for a health care trust and directed me to hire a health care trustee to administer it. The DNA results were given to a trusted person in a sealed envelope, which was to be opened only if hereditary diseases were detected. I will do everything I can to keep Carla's memory alive and well for her children and her family. No one else needs to know what she did. I never denied Carla's parents access to their grandchildren. They adored them and treated them well. I know they blamed me for their daughter's death. I could see it in their eyes, but they had the good sense to leave it alone. They probably thought they better be nice to me, otherwise I wouldn't let them see their grandchildren. I wouldn't have done it, but I was grateful that they left me alone. Beautiful children who needed their father. I sat in the front row and watched Stephen walk across the stage at his high school graduation ceremony. He received his diploma from the student council president. She smiled at him, and after he received his diploma, she hugged him tightly. Next in line was her daughter Jennifer. She also gave her a diploma and hugged her. Jennifer was Stephen's girlfriend. They had been together since his first day of high school 4 years ago. I couldn't be more proud of him, and I couldn't help but think Carla would be very proud too. I know I had tears in my eyes when they both walked off stage holding hands and looking so grown up. Stephen and Jennifer were both headed to Champaign to attend the University of Illinois in the fall, and the place was sure to be lit up. They were madly in love. It was obvious to everyone that they would eventually get married. I knew Carla would approve of Jennifer too. After the ceremony was over, they both came up to me and gave me a big hug. I couldn't be prouder of them than I was. Both graduated high school academically and were excellent athletes. Their futures were certainly bright. Stephen asked me if he and Jennifer could go to a few prom parties before they returned home, and I agreed. Jennifer leaned over and hugged me again and said, "Thank you, Daddy. We'll see you and Mommy later." After they left, I thought about what she said when she called me Daddy. I became her dad, too. Leslie, her mother, and I met a few weeks after Stephen started high school. She was student council president and very active in the school's extracurricular activities. Stephen kept telling me about Jennifer and what a great mom she was, and we ended up meeting at a football game. You would have thought I was 16 again because I immediately fell in love. I'm sure I acted like a teenager and probably looked and sounded stupid. I found out that she was a single mother. She divorced when Jennifer was 9 years old. The ex-husband wanted nothing to do with his family, and Jennifer never saw or heard from him. After we talked for a while, I asked her out for coffee after the game, and she accepted. From then on, we spent a lot of time together, and a year later, we got married. I love her very much, and she loves me back. For a long time, I denied that I could ever be happily married again, but I am. We have been a full-fledged family for 3 years now. She loves Stephen, Lori, and Gracie like her own children, and I love Jennifer like my own daughter. After all, I learned a long time ago that being a biological parent is not necessary to love a child. Leslie knows everything that happened with Steve and Carla. She knows everything I did at that time. I didn't want any secrets from her if I was going to love her and be with her for the rest of my life. When I told her, I saw her face change for a moment. She said she was surprised by my revelation, but knew that I was telling the truth, that the monster was gone forever, and therefore was not worried about our future. Our life together is fantastic. I have a new friend, a new lover, and a new partner for all my life dreams. My heart is filled with love for my new wife and our children, and yes, there is a little room for love for the good things I had with Carla. Stephen is a handsome young man and bears some resemblance to Carla, but as he gets older, he becomes more and more like my memory of his father. But Lori and Gracie are miniatures of their mother. They are beautiful and adorable, and I see so much of Carla in them that I just can't help but love her for giving me these wonderful children. As they got older, I told them everything I could about their mother. I want them to know her as I knew her, to love her as I did then, and to know that she loved them very much. At that moment, Leslie approached me, and my thoughts about the past were interrupted. She asked me where Stephen and Jennifer were going. I told her they wanted to go to a few prom parties before returning home. She smiled at me and told me that if I hurried, I could take her home and start working on fulfilling my promise to give her a child. We didn't have to wait long and headed home by car. Life is good and getting better. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.